Hi. In this video, I'd like to share with you some insights about how to think about climate change that I have personally found really helpful. But first, a bit of background. Why is how we think about climate change important, and why is it important right now? Well, recent extreme weather events over the past few months, like the incredible heat we had in the past summer throughout the Northern Hemisphere, the drought, the massive wildfires that we had in northern Canada as a result of that drought, and now something completely unprecedented, what was called a so-called instant hurricane that we saw in Acapulco several weeks ago. All of these events have, I think, many of us realizing that climate change is happening much faster than we expected. It's not happening in some far-off future, but right now. And in response to this, I think it's just natural for us to feel anxiety. And in response to that anxiety, I think it's natural for us to go down one of two different paths. The first is a kind of denial, of not wanting to face this, because it's really difficult to face. So rather than face it, we think that technology is going to magically come up with a solution to our problem, and that we can put all our worries out, in the back of our minds. That's on the one hand. On the other hand is despair. The belief that it's all hopeless, that it's too late, that there's nothing that we can do, and so we really do nothing. And the problem with both denial and despair is that they take away our agency. They disempower us, which among other things isn't really psychologically healthy. And more than that, it may be patently false. So the whole question of how to generate hope in the face of the climate crisis is an important one, then, both for our psychological health and for the health of the planet, because if we can generate a realistic hope, it's possible that we can keep working in a positive way to do something to stop the crisis. So then the question is how to generate realistic hope. Enter Thomas Homer-Dixon in his 2020 book, Commanding Hope. Homer-Dixon is a Canadian academic who studies complexity science, and I think he's somebody whose work deserves to be much better known. He specializes in looking at how the very interdependence of our world makes it uniquely vulnerable to the warming of the climate. And that the real dangers are the ones we don't normally think about. So it's not necessarily just rising ocean levels. It's the effects of the warming climate on the economy, on international security. So more and more conflicts breaking out. The growth of just massive climate refugee movements, and the rise of populism throughout the West in response to this. Knowing how bad things look like they may become, Homer-Dixon tackles the question of how to generate a realistic and empowering hope that navigates between denial and magical thinking on the one hand, and despair on the other. And he finds his way of generating hope from an unlikely source, J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Now, you'll remember that The Lord of the Rings is about the dire threat to Middle-earth created by Sauron and his massed armies. Rather than forming armies to do battle with him, which seems like the logical thing to do, Gandalf puts together a very small group to carry the Ring of Power to Mordor and to destroy it. At a council of leaders of Middle-earth, Gandalf is asked if this mission is despair or folly. That is, despair in the sense of a hopeless gesture because they believe it's too late really to do anything, or folly in the sense of underestimating the odds against success. Gandalf says, despair or folly? It is not despair, for despair is for those who see the end beyond all doubt. We do not. It is wisdom to recognize necessity when all other courses have been weighed, though as folly it may appear to those who cling to false hope. So I'm going to take just the first part of that answer and apply that to the climate crisis. So what really is Homer-Dixon drawing from this? He's saying that because we don't know the future, because we don't know the outcome of all our efforts, we don't know that that's going to be, we don't know whether humanity is going to be able to work together in time to stop catastrophic warming. We don't know all these things, and because we don't know all these things, we can and must recognize the necessity of action. Because as it turns out, our actions may make a difference. So this is a really simple but profound insight, and it takes a kind of humility on our part. That is, rather than being paralyzed in the face of the climate crisis, we can say, well, the truth is we don't know the future. And because we don't know the future, we can thread this path between denial and despair. And we can have a rational reason to continue to work in ways that each of us can, to do something to make a better future for ourselves and our children, our grandchildren, and for the planet. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the second insight Homer-Dixon takes from the Lord of the Rings. The idea that it may be the most unlikely of actions that in the end is the most powerful and the most rational. And I'd like to do this and tie it into the role that compassion training can play to help us utilize this most unlikely but perhaps most powerful ways to respond to the warming of the climate. Thank you.